Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure folks are going to be still joining, but we're just going to get started so that we we have a packed schedule today, so we want to make sure we have time for everyone's questions. Before I get started, I just wanted to run through some quick updates. My pal Torin here can hopefully throw some links in the chat. So as you notice, the coffee hour is being recorded for those who couldn't be here, and for those who are here and want to revisit anything that we covered today, you can find this coffee hour and all of our other coffee hours and the recordings of those on our YouTube channel. Someone will throw the YouTube channel link in the chat. We also, you'll find a direct link of our YouTube channel and our monthly newsletter, Actions and Impact. I'll put a link in the chat for that as well, for our most current newsletter. Since you registered for this coffee hour, you likely already received the newsletter, but if you got here from a different path, check it out. You can sign up for the newsletter by going to our website, sustainablect.org, scrolling to the bottom, typing in your email and clicking the sign up button. And while you're on our website, be sure to check out The Impact, our Sustainable CT podcast. We'll put a link in the chat for that as well. We put new episodes every 15th of the month, and it streams on anywhere you get your podcasts. For this month's episode, we had a great conversation with Daniel Cheeseborough, the first selectman of Stonington, who is also a member of Sustainable CT's board of directors, so be sure to check that out. So with that out of the way, I want to introduce our speakers and we'll get going. Today we're joined by Narcissus Green. She is a business education teacher at East Lyme High School who's going to discuss their brand new food diversion program. We're also joined by Megan McHale, representing the Fairfield PTA Council, who will discuss the Fairfield diversion programs that are in, I believe, 8 out of the 11 Fairfield district schools. We're also joined by Anna Kristen Dobb Murphy from the Sustainable Suffield Task Force, who's going to discuss Suffield's public school diversion programs. And last but not least, we're joined by Sherill Baldwin from DEEP, who's going to share more about the addition of K through 12 schools to the commercial organics recycling law. This portion of the law goes into effect in July 1st of 2026. So she's going to talk a little bit more about how that law might affect the schools in your district. So with that, I'm going to begin sharing my screen, and then I'm going to turn it over to Narcissus. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Take us away.
Okay, hi. My name is Narcissus Green. I'm the business education teacher at East Lyme High School. I also advise our DECA club, which is a marketing and entrepreneurship club. So I had DECA students help me a lot with the kind of rollout of getting the word out about this program. Can you move to the next slide? So the idea was that we were going to start sorting trash at lunch, and we use sustainable CT funds to be able to pay for Blue Earth, which is a composting company, to come and collect our food scraps. We don't compost on site. We have a collection at lunch that is a combination of students and teachers helping to sort trash, and then into, recycle versus actual landfill versus compostable items. And then Blue Earth picked it up. So a lot of our bill that we got from Sustainable CT is to pay for Blue Earth to actually pick up the waste. You can switch sides. Okay. So this is what it looks like. This is a picture from Trumbull High School, but I mean, it looks exactly the same here at our school. Essentially, you can just do all these animations. Sorry. Thanks. So this is what it looks like. So you can see at these white folding tables, students just bring their trash to the table. So the general population of students is not sorting their trash because that would definitely cause contamination issues. Instead, we have student volunteers and teacher volunteers helping. You can see the Blue Earth bin behind one of these students here. So the students bring their trash to the white folding table, and then it's sorted into the appropriate bin. We were able to get more than our 7,500 goal from our match fund, and then the rest of it was picked up by Sustainable CT. You can see the breakdown of the prices here. The bungee cords was for to keep the bins fully sealed. We don't want people just opening up the bins and putting whatever they want in them. So the bungee cords is kind of like a diversion from having people put extra things in here. So this is paying for this program for 2 years. We launched in January. So the idea is that we can go until January of 2027 with the money that we already have. You can switch slides. So this is everything that we did to kind of create awareness on what was happening, and what we did to get the Board of Ed to approve this, which they already did. So all of this has been done so far and even more. We were actually on the Channel 3 News. Luke Hydash did a special on it, and that kind of helped us. That was during our campaign, so that bumped up a lot of donations after that news segment. And there's been a lot of really good, just like things going on in the school. We have a school morning show that has been promoting the program. And we also have our school newspaper that is promoting the program. And there was lots going on in the newsletter that sent to parents and all of that. And that's how we were able to collect all of the funds. You can switch slides. This is just like, I feel like everybody on this Zoom would probably already know these benefits. This slide deck was what I presented to the Board of Ed to pitch this idea to them. So I was just kind of using it again, but I think you guys already know that, there's this Senate bill that's obviously good for the environment, great press. And the mission statement at East Lyme High School is to prepare students socially to be positive forces in the world and live responsible, purposeful, and healthy lives. And obviously showing this kind of good deed is definitely fits in with our mission statement. You can switch slides. And then, I'm sorry, can you go back one actually? So currently the East Lyme High School pays per ton for trash pickup. So we are seeing a reduction in the amount of trash that is being picked up, obviously, because that is now being composted instead of going into trash. So the school's saving money on that. And not only are they saving money on trash collection, but they're also saving money on plastic bags and plastic waste, because previously we had about 20 trash cans spread out throughout the Commons cafeteria area at lunch, and students would just put items in the trash cans, and then it didn't matter if the trash can was half full or partially full, they would all get emptied at the end of the day. Well, now, since students are bringing everything to a sorting station, the trash bin gets completely full before it's emptied. So we've gone from using 20 trash bags every day for lunch down to 8. So that's been a really great, like, just improvement in plastic waste and also reducing custodial work because they don't have to empty as many trash bags, all of those things. So the custodians have also been on board. They help us bring the bins in and out every day. So it's really been a big team effort. And that's all I have. So whatever questions you guys had, I saw a couple of things pop up in the chat. Are the collection bins also? No, they're not. So the collection bins are only out at lunch. That's it. They're not out at the beginning of the day. They're not out right now. They are only out at lunch, and that's to reduce contamination. If they were just out as a normal, like, 3-bin system where you just have, like, trash, recycle, food waste, there would be major contamination issues and people would just throw things in whatever bin they wanted. We hope to eventually move to a situation where you have it began in January. We thought it'd be great to move to a 3-bin system where we have a 3-bin system everywhere, much like a college campus, or like Pfizer even has that. But we're not there yet, and it's really expensive to get a 3-bin system to kind of revamp that. And but for right now, we're just collecting at lunch, and that is the only time the bins are available. Blue Earth picks up every Monday, so once a week, and then we are obviously not going to be using them during the summer. We have about 850 students, maybe closer to 900, maybe closer to 800. 850 is a really good estimate right now. And they have 2 lunch waves. So we have approximately 450 students at each lunch wave where we are sorting the trash material. But Blue Earth will not be picking up during the summer, and our budget accounted for Blue Earth picking up roughly 9 months out of the year, because they don't come during breaks either. Is there any? No, we are not composting anything on campus. That is the reason why we have Blue Earth. We cannot do that. Our Board of Ed would definitely not allow that. How many volunteers per day? We technically need one in each station, and we have four sorting stations. So we technically need 4 volunteers per lunch wave. So 8 volunteers per day, because we have 2 lunch waves. However, usually the kids who are helping us with this are using it as like a social event, which is fine. And so it'll be like 3 or 4 kids at one, it'll be 3 or 4 kids at one station because they're just like hanging out and having their lunch together, and then they're sorting when they finish their lunch. So that's been working out really well. But hypothetically you need 8. We need 8 people. Do you have to qualify for sustainable? I don't really understand that question.
I can jump in and answer that question. So yeah, the community match fund is open to anyone in any registered town. Specifically for composting programs, we'll support programs in public schools. So if it's a private school, unfortunately, we can't support those sorts of composting programs. But if you wanted to get a composting program started in a public school in your community, that's something we could definitely would love to talk to you more about, and would likely qualify for a community match fund matching grant. And I think I see lots of questions, but I want to respect Narcissa's time because she's got to get back to her class. So yeah, maybe we'll pause there on questions and we'll move to our next speaker. How does that sound? Thank you.
Sounds good. If anybody wants to just email me directly with anything, I'm just going to put my email because I know there's questions I did not get to. Why don't I just put my email in the chat? And if anybody wants to email me specific questions or has more, like wants to have a conversation about this, they can. So my email's in the chat.
That's perfect.
Thank you for inviting me. And I am excited to hear all of the other people who are going to be speaking today, because this all sounds like good stuff and I wish I could stay. So have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day. Okay, next up, we're going to hear from our Fairfield friends. Just let me back up. So I'll turn it over to Megan McHale.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this with everyone today. You can go to the next slide. So Fairfield is a pretty big district. We have 11 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 3 high schools, and almost 10,000 students altogether. You can go to the next slide. And here's sort of how we brought cafeteria compost to Fairfield. So there was an inkling of interest already, and the school department had decided to pilot compost in 2 elementary cafeterias for the 2023-2024 school year. I'm sorry, for the 2022-2023 school year. And then they were planning to add a 3rd school for 2023-2024. And it just, it felt really slow. And also like we weren't really getting the efficiencies that we needed to get to make it financially viable for our school department. So we thought if we could kind of get the ball rolling a little bit faster, then we could make it make sense. So I'm a parent. I have an elementary schooler and a middle schooler, and I became the VP of sustainability for our PTA council, which is like the umbrella organization for all of the PTAs in Fairfield, in the spring of 2022. And we, kind of spent the year thinking about how we could make this work. And then in the summer of 2023, we launched our Sustainable CT campaign to fundraise to bring cafeteria compost to 5 more elementary schools over the next 2 years. Because we knew that there were going to be some budget constraints the following year because of a renewed teacher contract that included significant, well-deserved raises. And so we didn't want to be pushing our luck on the budget. So we thought if we could cover it with 2 years, it would become like part of the culture in Fairfield and everyone would expect it. And it would be kind of easier to roll into the town's budget. So the campaign was super successful. We raised a total of $62,500. So it was a matching grant where we raised $25,000, and Sustainable CT chipped in 1.5 times. And since we had the funds and the momentum, we decided it made sense to launch all of the elementary schools in that school year, just to, it was just it was just logical, in terms of all of the practicalities, training the custodians, ordering the supplies, working on the contract with Curbside Compost, who we use. They're owned by a different company now, but they're still called Curbside Compost, I think. So over that summer, we conducted custodian training, where we went to one of the schools that had already started and showed them the setup and how it would all work. And there was a ton of resistance, but we did kind of say, you know, this is what's happening. So let's like figure out how we can work as a team. And then over that fall and winter, we launched all of the programs at all 11 schools. Part of that process was me going to every school to meet with the principal and the custodian and whoever was like a stakeholder at that school parent wise. So we have green teams in every school. And those parents were really kind of integral to the implementation of the program in most of the schools. So all 11 schools were all 11 elementary schools were composting by March of 2024. And then in the fall of 2024, we rolled the program up with that first kind of 5th grade class that graduated from elementary school. When they went to middle school, we took compost with them. So it was sort of a twofold reasoning. One was that these kids already know how to do it, so it won't be as difficult to sort of train them. And the other factor being that the hauling is very expensive, and we could not really afford to do the entire school at once. Our middle schools are pretty big. They 2 of them have about 800 students, and one of them has about 500 students. So we could only afford to do 6th grade at once. But our goal is to have this 6th grade, the class that's currently in 6th grade in middle school now, to have the compost program roll up with them so that by the time they're seniors in high school, every grade will be composting. And we were able to get compost hauling added to the budget for the 2025-2026 school year. We are not fully through the budgeting process here in Fairfield yet, so it still needs to be approved by our Board of Finance and our RTM, but at the moment it does not seem to be on the chopping block. So we're very hopeful that it will remain in the budget going forward. We can go to the next slide. So in terms of implementation, like I said, we did the custodian training over the summer before we began. Something that is in the works is another custodian training. And I think personally that it would be beneficial to do more frequent custodian trainings, and maybe not even training so much as like a conversation with the custodians, because I think that a huge part of this is making everyone feel like they have a voice at the table, and not that they're being told that things are changing and this is how we want you to do it, because the custodians especially are the experts in the cafeteria. They know better than anyone else what the trash output looks like and what it takes to get that out of the cafeteria at the end of the day. So I think giving them an opportunity to share with us how they feel about what's going on and what could be done better is really important. As I mentioned, we did on-site preparatory visits at all schools. So we went to see the space, figure out where this setups would go, whether there would be 1 or 2 setups, whether they would roll in the bin or bring the compost outside. There was, every school is very different. So we kind of had to customize the program at each place. At every school, there was an all-school assembly. We put together a slideshow about why to compost and how to do it. And a lot of them, I think, played games about holding up a piece of trash and asking the kids to figure out which bin it belonged in. So all of the schools did that. And then we had 2 to 3 months of parent volunteers in the cafeteria at almost every school. A couple of schools did not want parents, which was their choice. But having the parents on hand is tremendously helpful. It also educates the parents about compost. But it really helps the kids, especially the littler kids who are still kind of learning everything about being in the cafeteria to begin with. And then every year, so since it's only our second year, but we've had parent volunteers in the cafeteria at the beginning of the school year again, because kindergartners don't know what they're doing yet. And also because, the summer slide and everything, not everyone remembers the deal. So it's great to have parents come in again. And I would say also, like, I certainly hope I will have an opportunity to do another all school assembly at my son's elementary school, because I think we get detached from why we do things, and it just, becomes kind of rote, and it's really important for the kids to understand why we're doing it. Do you want to go to the next slide? So some of the challenges that we faced, a limited number of available haulers. Really, we felt like curbside compost was the only option for us, although I think that we, need to explore more. But I know when the school district was renegotiating their contract with the trash hauler, they asked to add compost, but they would just be subcontracting to curbside. So it only made sense for us to work directly with curbside. So we were kind of stuck on that, and the price has increased significantly year over year. They really, I think, gave us some excellent pricing in the beginning so we could get this off the ground, which was generous of them. But it's really tricky because the cost of compost hauling, as I'm sure many of you know, is much more than the cost of MSW, so municipal solid waste. So that's kind of a tricky thing. We are in the process of trying to evaluate whether we could reduce the number of MSW pickups that we have in an average week, but it's people feel very nervous about cutting back on that. So that's still in progress. As I said, some schools prefer not to have parent helpers, and some schools find it hard to get parent helpers. So I think having invested parents is just like a really important part of the holistic view of what we're doing here, that we're not just trying to reduce the waste of the individual schools. What we're really trying to do is teach our community about reducing their waste and about the value of keeping food waste separate. And some custodians were not willing to do extra work, although certainly, like, the custodians at my son's school have found that it's actually less work. I think, like, Narcissa was saying, like, it ends up being less bins, less work for them overall. At my school, they just literally roll the compost bin in at the beginning of the lunch period. They roll it out when it's done, and that's it. And it's just so much easier than kind of individually picking up all of these trash bags. But, change is hard, so it takes a little bit of convincing sometimes. Next slide. So key takeaways, I already mentioned this, but working with custodians and encouraging their input on best practices is really important. Parent support is critical. Staff buy-in and education is also critical. So, like, that same slideshow that we show to the kids, we show to the staff as well, because they need to understand why we're doing this. And finally, it will not be perfect, but it will be good. And we can't expect, there to be someone supervising these kids putting their trash away every day for the rest of their lives. So we have to trust that it'll work out. And, there certainly will be some contamination. And we just have to live with that. I think that being afraid to do it because there might be some contamination is not a good way to explore a project like this. And finally, Curbside tells us that in the calendar year 2024, we diverted 593,000 pounds of food waste, which is the equivalent of 412,372 miles driven. That's for the 8 schools paid for by the grant. So we do have, as I mentioned, the school district pays for 3 schools currently. and the grant pays for the rest. So this is just for the grant. So it's actually potentially more than that, although we know that Curbside is estimating the weight of the bins. So it's probably actually slightly less than this, but suffice to say, it is definitely hundreds of thousands of pounds that have been removed from the waste stream. So that's it for me. I'm happy to answer questions, or if we want to do questions at the end, I'll stay.
I think we'll pause on questions just for now because I want to make sure we can get through everybody's slides. But if there's questions that you see in the chat that you have the answers to, that would be great. For right now, we're going to switch over to talk more about Suffield, and I'll hand it over to Anna Kristen.
Thank you so much. You can go right to the next slide. A lot of similarities to what we just heard from Megan, which is kind of cool to hear. So this is just kind of an overview of what the schools in Suffield look like. We're a much smaller school district than Fairfield. I'm going to actually start on the far right side of this slide. So the high school program was actually already up and running when Sustainable Suffield got involved. Sustainable Suffield is like the town's task force for sustainability. And so the high school program had been set up through a grant by the Student Sustainability Council. So it was all, can you go back one slide? Oh, 2 slides.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, it's giving me trouble. Sorry about that.
No worries. It was already all set up, which was awesome. It was fully like student implemented, student led. And so students were doing kind of like coaching, standing near the bins, volunteering during lunch hours. And they found very quickly that once they stopped standing near the bins, that there were really high rates of contamination, not a lot of participation. So when we partnered with them to roll out the programs at the other schools, we talked a lot about starting with the youngest students and kind of similar to what Megan said, kind of rolling the program up as the students age. So if you look to the far left of the slide, we have a K-2 school, Spalding. There's about 450 students in that school. And that was our pilot school. We started with them again because they're the youngest. We figured, most easy buy-in, the administration and teachers were willing. And our programs are self-managed. So we did some initial training and the bins are out. The elementary schools do have duty clerks that are in the cafeteria that can, help with some coaching. But so far the feedback from the hauler that we use, which is USA Waste and Recycling, has been that there's really low contamination rates. So in November 2023, we started the pilot program at Spalding, and then in September 2024, the first week of school, because the incoming third graders were already familiar with the program, we rolled it out at the intermediate school for all 3 grades. And then we're currently in the works to get the last school launched, which is the middle school. And it's a little bit on hold because we're really trying to work with the student leadership group within the middle school to have them kind of lead that rollout so that we get more of that buy-in, because the middle school is a little bit of a tougher population to get that buy-in. So we're kind of holding off because they lost their advisor recently. So we're just waiting for that to get going again. And I'll talk about what we're planning for that a little bit later. So you can go to the next slide, please. So basically the kind of steps that we followed was we researched and selected vendors. So like I said, we ended up selecting USA Waste and Hauling. They also do all of our trash and recycling pickup here in town. We selected the pilot school. We planned a pitch to the administration, which turned out we didn't really need to do because they were on board right away. And then we held some planning meetings, and that involved some of the high school student group, some teachers and the district science coach, and then also the vendor, USA Waste and Recycling. You can go to the next slide. So these are pictures. So for each school, when we launch, we do like a kind of like a big kickoff day. It includes both educational components, but also like some fun, engaging activities. So these are just some pictures from the launch at Spalding at the pilot school. So USA provided like signage on the walls that goes right by where the bins are, as well as like stickers that go on the bins. You can go to the next slide. So this is a picture we had, like we started with like a little intro. So you can see there, that's Daniel Pestrucello from USA Waste and Hauling. He's speaking. They had made a little video of him kind of explaining the process of what they were going to do when they got into the cafeteria. And so the students had already been watching that video in the week leading up to this. So when he walked in, he was kind of like a little celebrity. They were all excited to see the guy from the video. And so we did a little intro, and then if you go to the next slide, we broke the kids into groups so that each grade had their own assembly. And we did outside, we did like a little touch a truck event. USA brought some trucks to show like what happens with the food scraps after they leave the school. And then inside we did like a little snack. So actually our youth services department in town donated some snacks. And we had, the kids ate, and then we used that opportunity to walk them through what it looks like where each component of the snack would go. So they kind of practiced what they would do. And then this all happened before their actual lunch wave. So then they got to practice again that same day when they got to lunch. You can go to the next slide. This is very similar. We use the same model at the intermediate school, which is grades 3 to 5, except this time the student, the high school group took a little bit more ownership and did more of the presenting and coaching. So you can see some of those students here. And the bins look a little bit different. In our pre-planning meetings, we involved like administration, custodial staff. And so the custodian had asked to add those signs to the back of the bins as well for this school. You can go to the next slide. And sorry, there's a lot of words on here. It's primarily just notes to myself, but also so that when the slides get sent out, you have kind of references. But these are just some of the details behind the scenes. So we prepared some like information for administration to include in newsletters home, both before and after the kickoff. And that also tied in some of our town-wide programs, like we give residents outdoor composters, or people that recycle food scraps from home can drop them off at a community location. So we kind of included that tie into home. I already mentioned we had the video ahead of time, and then the high school students also planned some little composting projects that they did with the students in their classes after the kickoff had already happened. One thing that we kind of tailored to each school is making sure that things were age appropriate. So the lower elementary school, the K-2, we kept it very basic, but then for grades 3 to 5, we got into a little bit more detail about, why we recycle food scraps, what happens to the food scraps. Our food scraps get sent to local on-farm anaerobic digesters, so they end up producing energy. So we just talked a little bit more about that. And we gave them little takeaways so that like they had kind of something to hold on to, and maybe talk to their families about it when they got home. So the lower elementary students got like, I'm a master composter sticker. We had bracelets for the intermediate school. So just little takeaways. And then there's ongoing check-ins. So we get a monthly report from our hauler, and those stats get sent out through the school newsletters. And if there's ever any issues, which we haven't had with contamination, they would let us know. We did do for the pilot school like an end of year celebration where the kids got ice cream, and then we kind of did the math of how many students it would take to equal the amount of food waste that they recycled. And then we took like a group shot because it ended up being basically one grade of students was equivalent to the amount of food waste that they had recycled, just to kind of show them what it looked like. And then one thing that we learned from school 1 to school 2 was that, educating the staff beforehand was really important in a little bit more detail than we would the students. So with the intermediate school, we did do like a presentation ahead of time that explained, why it's important, what happens when food waste isn't recycled, things like that. Can go to the next slide, please. So again, with the middle school, I mentioned this is what we're doing right now. We really want the students to kind of plan their own pitch to the administration. And they're doing like some marketing and creating videos to share on their announcements about the program, and then getting their input on what engaging activities we could do for the launch day, because like middle schoolers probably don't want to go out and touch a truck. So just, tailoring it to the age group. Can go to the next slide, please. These are just some examples of the outreach that we have on a monthly basis. So we have a kind of a town, like we do on our social media, town-wide data, little graphic. And then on the left is the school one that gets sent out monthly by the administrators. Go to the next slide. Some challenges. So for the activities that we planned for the kickoff days, everything took longer than we thought it would, and we had too much food. So we did end up being able to donate it, but basically the takeaway was less is more. Like Megan talked about, really working ahead of time to get that key stakeholder buy-in, custodial staff, kitchen staff. Our kitchen staff also does on the back end food scrap recycling in the kitchen. Another issue we're running into is ongoing funding for the program. So Sustainable Suffield, we get our funding through the NIPS law where, 5 cents per nip bottle that's purchased in town, the town gets money back and you can use that for waste diversion or environmental cleanup. So we are currently using that money to pay for all the schools, and we have not been able to get the schools to absorb that into their budget, but that is ultimately the goal. And then, yeah, the other challenge is just like the contamination with the older students. And I think there might be one more slide, potentially not. That might be it.
I think that's it.
Okay, so that's it. Oh, and
Excellent.
sorry, just one last thing that I wanted to say, kind of like big picture, once we roll out all the schools, eventually like recycling and building awareness of waste is great, but then we, our next step would be like talking about waste reduction. We've had some pushback on things like sharing tables because the USDA has really strict guidelines about what can and cannot be shared once it leaves the kitchen. So that's kind of next step after all of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna Kristen. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Cheryl, I believe, is going to share her slides. And that will be, and then we'll have time after for questions.
Okay, do you see? Am I good?
Yes, looks great.
I'm going to go very quickly, but I have a lot of slides, and that's because they'll be shared later, and there's a lot of hyperlinks. Apologies for everybody who already heard a lot of this on Monday. I just wanted to start by saying this was a study that was done by RAP in the US. It's about behavior change, and I think it's a great place to start because it's not just a quiz. It actually helps us understand about behavior change and where original behaviors come from. The reason that the youngest generation are the bigger wasters right now is because they learn it in school. And so that's a good lesson learned. You're probably familiar with the Connecticut law. We have a commercial organics recycling law. I won't go into all the details about it was passed in 2011. There's been a lot of changes to it. But if you look at the last two bullets in 2024, passed Public Act 2445, and it added K through 12 schools, which is why I'm here today. It impacts schools that generate 26 tons annually and are within 20 miles of an authorized facility. That law goes into effect July 1st, 2026. In addition, an executive order that passed in 2021 says by 2024, executive branch agencies shall implement organics and food waste diversion programs. This impacts 18 technical schools one of which may be in your town, which will be required to also collect food scraps. And it does not need to have 26 tons or more, and it does not need to be within 20 miles of a facility. So please be aware of that if you're a recycling coordinator. So this is the Public Act. It basically states each public or non-public school building or educational facility. It means that students need to be enrolled there. If the school generates 26 tons or more of source separated organic material, that material needs to be collected and then distributed or sent to an authorized facility. There's a hyperlink on the bottom to that law if you want to learn more about it. Most people the big question that comes up is like, yeah, but does it impact my school? So the way to think about it is you have to think about, does my school generate 26 tons or more per year? And am I within 20 miles of an authorized facility? So the first thing to think about is an authorized facility. We have an updated map. Luciana, I'm sorry to call on you, but if you want to go ahead and put a hyperlink in the chat for this, that would be great. It's a great map. I'm not going to go into great detail about how to use it, but if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to Luciana or I. Our email addresses will be at the end of the slide presentation. But basically what you do is up on the top corner right here, where my mouse is, under the word food residual recycling, you can actually put your address, and then you'll find out whether or not you're in a yellow or a blue radius. Where do those colors come from? All the facilities that are in Connecticut that are authorized and facilities across the border. That means that those facilities are authorized to accept food scraps for composting, and it will trigger your school into needing to apply to the law. Note, you don't have to bring to the nearest facility, but you do need to bring it somewhere. And again, this is the map. It's got a key to help you understand what all those diagrams mean. You can also see from New Haven all the way down to New London along the shoreline, we don't have any facilities. Does that mean you don't have to compost? Yes. Does it mean you shouldn't? No, of course. If your school is collecting food scraps and you're not triggered by the law, I wish I had gold stars for every one of you to give out, because that is fantastic. So maybe you're within that 20 miles, now what? Well, the way the law reads is that a school generates an average of 26 tons or more per year. So how do you figure that out? Well, we don't know exactly, we don't have all the exact tools, but we have some resources we can use. First, CET has a food waste estimation guide. There's a link there. And it looks at the age of the student and the enrollment of the school, and then has a basic average of pounds per week per student, and you can extract that information. The department is also using this tool, and we're using it to try to understand what schools we think are going to be triggering the law. However, this toolkit or this estimation guide does have some drawbacks. The way the law read is it's about school food scraps that are generated in the school building, not the cafeteria. And so we have to take into account breakfast, classroom snacks, the teacher's room, kitchen food waste. Do you have culinary classrooms? And it even includes other activities when school is not in session. I'm going to let that sink in because I am the bearer of bad news today. So we also have found a calculator that did do a lot of research and study related to breakfast. And so we are also beginning to use this tool. Again, all estimations, but we have to start somewhere. So the department is currently looking at all schools in Connecticut and using both the CET calculator as well as the World Wildlife Fund database, and trying to figure out what schools we think are going to trigger the law. We're also trying to take into account schools that have culinary programs and or central kitchens attached to them. A lot of folks are also asking about costs. We don't necessarily know all the costs that are associated with what it will take to put together these programs. We are having a lot of conversations with different schools, and we have found ranges far and wide, anything from $400 to set up to almost $6,000. We've also found that most of the costs, of course, are associated with hauling. And sometimes the hauling costs are part of the school budget. Sometimes they're the district budget. Sometimes they're the municipal budget. And sometimes they rely solely on grants. I don't have any answers today for you related to that. Clearly, this is a law that was put out not by the department, but by, I believe it was the Department of Education. And we do recognize the challenges that the schools are going to face in terms of costs. But I think a lot of schools are not going to have to be in compliance with the law because they're not going to be triggered by the law. Quick FAQ. If I have an entire school building and it's only pre-K students, Montessori, etc., am I triggered by the law? No, the law states K through 12. If I have two school buildings that are attached, for example, I have a middle school and a high school, or an elementary and a middle school, how do I calculate the food waste? Well, if the schools are attached, perhaps they share a cafeteria, or maybe they share dumpsters and they share the waste contract, we're looking at them as one school. So that means you would calculate the number of food scraps that are generated from a high school with using those numbers, a middle school, and then you'd have to combine them, which means that those schools most likely will trigger the law. What if there are two schools on the same campus but not adjoined? Again, if they are sharing the waste contract or if they're sharing waste dumpsters, we're viewing them as one school because you would be under the same contract. Based on the wording of Public Act 2445, the amount of food scraps generated is based on how much is generated in the building, regardless of whether classes are in session. Is this true? The answer is yes. That is the current interpretation. So this includes kitchens, snacks in classrooms, additional meals, special events, sporting events. These are all the questions, by the way, that we keep asking our in-house legal folks. And they said calculating food scraps and the collection of food scraps, etc., would include special events at schools like plays and concerts, PTA meetings, pizza parties, etc. So at this point, we're talking about triggering. But yes, the follow-up question is, you would need to collect that food scraps as well. Will that mean every single food scrap needs to be collected? We understand the challenges that this faces, but I'm just sharing how the law reads at this point. As Public Act 2445 states, students need to be enrolled in the building. We assume a school's district central kitchen is not part of this law if it is not adjoined to the school or on the same campus. This is true. However, what was interesting is we learned that central kitchens that are not attached to the school are not impacted by Public Act 2445, but they are impacted by the commercial organics recycling law if they already generate 26 tons or more. And if they generate 26 tons or more, it doesn't matter if they're within 20 miles of a facility. So tricky point in terms of two laws there. So is it okay? My school already collects food scraps, right? And I'm composting on site. Is that okay? Yes. You're sending it to a local farm or maybe a piggery. Is that okay? Yes. Or maybe you're sending it to Bright Feeds, an animal feed manufacturer. Is that okay? Yes. Also, some questions we've gotten about outreach. Just so you know, I love that teachers and parents are helping develop these programs, but ultimately it is up to the school to develop and pay for these programs, because if they are impacted by the law, they are required to create these programs. So we have not been reaching out to school groups and teachers. We have been reaching out to associations. And I wanted to let you know who we've already met with and who we're meeting with soon. So we have met with the Association of Principals and Superintendents, for example. We have given notification to all the boards of education in Connecticut. We have given notification to the School Nutrition Association of Connecticut. We have been invited and presented to a number of COGs. If we have not come out to your COGs, by all means, feel free to invite us. We also have a number of COGs coming up. And more important, our School Buildings and Grounds Association. We hope to bring up the issue of maintenance staff, those that are friendly to these programs and those that are not. And that if they are triggered by the law, it has to be part of their work and part of their job. Some resources we have a brand new webpage. It includes everything from how to set up a recycling program to how to set up a school food scraps program. We do have a webinar coming up. We don't have school-age children. Apologies. We scheduled it during school vacation. We're already getting lots of pushback. We're probably going to be rescheduling this. So thank you for your patience on this. And this is our contact information. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. So now we'll jump into some questions. There's a lot of them. So I'll just pose the question, and then whoever, Anna Kristen, Megan, or Cheryl, or others on the line that have some insight, please feel free to jump in. So scrolled back a little ways. Danielle asked, what's the cost of hauling? I get the sense this varies widely depending on how close you are to a hauler, what hauler service you're using, and how many schools. But Megan or Anna Kristen, do you want to jump in just to give a sense of sort of what the cost is generally?
Sure. So we pay per pickup, which I think is like an important distinction. Just because like I'm on the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission in our town, and we pay most regular waste is paid for by the ton, but the compost hauling is paid for by the number of pickups. So we pay about per school, we pay about $600 a month for 2 pickups a week.
Ours is, it's $250 a month per school. That's 1 pickup a week, and that's a 2-yard dumpster.
Right. So we have just 64-gallon totes. So we don't have a dumpster.
Great. Jody asked, have you looked into on-site composting with tumblers or electric composters?
We thought about that. I think it just takes so much ongoing work. You would either need a ton of volunteers to maintain a compost pile. 'Cause I live on a farm, so we have one here, and it's like it needs ongoing input. So we did not decide to go that route.
Same, and also for us, that would have made the collection process a lot more complicated, because doing like backyard composting, which is what it would be, is really limits like what you can accept. But our current situation, and I mentioned this in the chat, we compost our trays and all of our food. So it's, meat, bones, dairy, everything, as well as the trays themselves. So we wouldn't be able to collect like that if we were doing it on site.
Great, thanks for that. Sherill, do you know if there's any considerations for if schools wanted to do on-site composting in terms of permitting or anything like that?
If schools are composting food scraps that they generated in their school, they are allowed to compost those materials. It's when they accept food scraps from offsite that it triggers permit requirements.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And even though I didn't say it, you could do it with worms. Nothing like a good vermicomposting system.
Nice. I bet the kids would get a kick out of that, especially the littler ones. Next question from Danielle. How do you store the food scraps before picked up? Before they are picked up?
We just keep them in the bins outside. Some of the schools have locks on the bins, but we haven't really found that that's necessary. The schools that don't have bins haven't had any trouble with pests or anything like that. And I think like something that people always ask about, like when we're introducing this idea to like the principals or someone who's maybe not familiar with compost, they always say, oh, but what about the smell? What about the animals? And I always remind them that this is actually the same trash that we were already making. We're just organizing it differently. So it really is not a problem.
Yeah, ours is just a 2-yard dumpster outside. And the hauler does offer like bear-proof cans, but it makes the lid really hard to open. So we decided to just try it, and we haven't had any issues.
Great, thank you. Next question from Robin. Do any schools have compostable utensils? Megan, I know you mentioned you have compostable trays, or are you using silverware and washing these items?
Our utensils are not oh, sorry, go ahead, Anna.
No, you go.
Our utensils are not compostable. It's something that we would love to get to eventually. Although probably like in a more ideal situation, we would go to reusables. That's something that we're trying to figure out, but it's, has its own can of worms to open in terms of like labor and staffing and energy usage. So eventually we hope to get there, but right now we're just working on the trays.
Yeah, our schools have reusable trays, but there's like a capacity issue with the dishwasher, so not all students end up using the reusable trays. And then I believe they have plastic utensils. And actually, our food scraps go to like a depackaging facility just across the Massachusetts line. And even if it's like a compostable item, it gets sorted out. Those do not go into the anaerobic digesters.
I would add that I'm not aware of any facilities in Connecticut that would accept compostable or plastic utensils. And I think it would be great in terms of next steps where we might consider. And Anna, Kristen, I think it's lovely that you are at least attempting to do some reusables. And if we were going to change the system, it would be required that all new schools have a kitchen with a dishwasher, because reusables are not only more environmental, but over the long run, they're also economic and they're safer for the children to eat off of.
Great, thanks. Another question for Anna Kristen. Did USA provide the bins to your school, or did you have to buy the bins separately?
No, they provided the bins.
Okay, great. Let's see. Also, if anyone has any questions and they want to just come off mute, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask, or raise your hand as I scroll, look for the next question. I think Jennifer asked Anna what size toters and dumpsters are USA providing. I believe you mentioned it, but if you don't mind sharing again.
Yeah, so it's just like I think it's 36 gallon, like a regular size, like cafeteria trash bin inside. And then that gets wheeled out, and there's a 2-yard dumpster outside that gets emptied into daily. And then the dumpster outside gets hauled weekly.
Perfect. And I believe this is a question for you, Cheryl, from Megan. If our hauler is giving actuals that don't match the estimator, what does that mean in terms of the law?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I can say that we are going to continue to use our estimate. And if we think that a school is triggered by the law, the principals will be hearing from me and letting them know that we believe that they're triggered by the law. And then we'll be offering technical assistance from the Center for Ecotechnology.
Great. Lindsay, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I don't really have a question. So I don't work for Board of Ed, but I work for the Public Works Department in Bristol. And we have a very good relationship with the Board of Ed in Bristol. And we are constantly helping them create programs. So we have a pilot program right now in one of the middle schools for food waste, and we're using Blue Earth. But I do ask the Board of Ed to reach out to your local Public Works Department, because there are tools that they can help you with. And they also might have a recycle coordinator that would help you just guide a way to start these programs also.
That's great. That's a great point. Thank you. Barbara, did you want to come off mute?
Okay, I'm off mute. I just wanted to add about compostable ware and worm bins, a comment. For compostable serviceware, which includes utensils, trays, and all that stuff, they really don't add any nutritional value to compost, and a lot of commercial composters don't want them. So it's something to be aware of. There's also the problem of people not being able to distinguish compostable from plastic. Sometimes they can look very similar, and then you invite contamination. As far as the worm bin, it's wonderful. I just went over to a local library to show a worm bin to set up for a Food Waste Prevention Day project with young kids, and they love it. But you have to be aware that it doesn't take everything that you might send to a commercial composter or even a backyard compost, because they don't like citrus and alliums and a couple other things that you have to be aware of. But it is great fun and they're easy to make. And but I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. So we're just about at time. I know there's some more questions in the chat, so we'll do our best to look those over and see if we can get you answers. Otherwise, all of the speakers here have kindly, willingly said that we can share their emails, so we will be doing that in the follow-up email as well. I also just want to mention, in terms of funding, Megan's project and Narcissus project were both funded through the Community Match Fund. If you are interested in starting a program, in one of your schools, please feel free to reach out to us to discuss. I'll throw the email in the chat where you can reach us. It's just funding@sustainableCT.org. And we'll also include that in the follow-up email as well. Thank you again to all of our speakers for joining us today and for all of the information they imparted and all of the cool programs that they're working on. It was really great to learn more. And thank you to all that joined us today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.